The drive took 2 hours and 40 minutes. Marcus knew this because he'd checked before leaving, and then checked again at the first traffic light, and then a third time somewhere past the highway interchange where the road got flat and the trees thinned out, and there was nothing to look at except the kind of landscape that made you think about how much time you were spending not doing other things. He had a call at 4. He'd told his father he'd be there by noon, which meant if they were efficient, and there was no reason not to be efficient, it was a storage room, boxes, 2 or 3 hours of sorting, maybe less. He could be back on the road by 2:30, 3 at the latest, and take the call from the car. He'd told his wife the same thing. She'd said, "Give your father my love." She'd paused before saying it, that very small pause, and Marcus had not asked what the pause meant. The house looked the same. That was the thing about his father's house. It always looked exactly the same, as if time had made an agreement with it to leave it alone. Same beige paint, same wooden gate with the hinge that needed adjusting, same window box where his mother had kept geraniums, and which now held nothing but dried soil and a dried-out twig that might once have been something. His father had never replanted it. Marcus had never asked why. He parked on the street because the driveway had a crack down the middle that had gotten wider since last visit, and he didn't want to catch a tire in it. He grabbed the paper bag from the passenger seat. He'd stopped and bought pastries from a bakery off the highway. Slightly expensive, the kind his father probably wouldn't eat, but would mention for months. And he walked up to the door and rang the bell. Footsteps. Slow ones. His father opened the door and looked at him for a moment without saying anything, the way he always did, like he was checking that it was still the same person. "Marcus," he said. "Hi, Dad." He was smaller than Marcus remembered, which happened every time. Not shorter exactly, but compressed somehow, folded slightly inward at the shoulders. He was wearing the same cardigan he'd had for, Marcus tried to calculate, at least 7 years. Brown, with 2 missing buttons that had never been replaced. "Come in," his father said. "I made coffee." If you know what it's like to walk into a parent's house and feel, suddenly, the full weight of how infrequently you've been there, then you already know something about where this story goes. And if you don't know that yet, maybe this is worth watching anyway. Subscribe if you haven't. We tell these kinds of stories here. The quiet ones. His father's name was Robert. He was 78 years old. He had lived in his house for 31 years, longer than Marcus had been alive when they moved in, which made it the only house Marcus thought of when someone said the word home, despite the fact that he owned a different house now in a different city and had lived there for 12 years. Robert had been an engineer, the kind who dealt in infrastructure, bridges and drainage systems and things that were meant to last longer than the people who built them. He'd retired at 68, which he'd approached with the same methodical calm he'd applied to everything, made a plan, executed the plan, moved into the next phase. He'd said he was going to travel. He'd taken one trip with a friend from work to a city he'd always wanted to see and come back satisfied in a way that seemed, to Marcus, like he'd ticked the box and didn't need to tick it again. After Marcus's mother died, 8 years ago, the winter Marcus had been in the middle of a project launch and had come home for 4 days and then left. Robert had continued. That was the only word for it. He continued. He went to the market on Tuesdays. He read. He watched the news. He maintained the house with the precision of someone who understood load-bearing structures and didn't want to be surprised by failure. He never called first. This was a thing Marcus had always found vaguely reassuring without examining why. His father didn't call first. He answered calls, was available, responded, but he didn't initiate. Marcus had taken this, over the years, to mean that everything was fine. "The room's at the back," his father said, handing him a coffee. Some of it's heavy. I didn't want to start without you. How long has it been like that? A while. Since your mother. He stopped. Reconsidered. Some of it's older than that. Marcus looked at the hallway. The house smelled the same. Wood polish, something faintly like the laundry detergent his mother had used, a smell he couldn't have named but recognized immediately, the way smells work. We'll get through it, Marcus said. His father nodded. Drink your coffee first. They sat at the kitchen table, which was the same kitchen table, and they had coffee and the pastries, which his father did eat, one carefully with a small plate under it, and they talked about the drive and about the weather and about a bridge in the news that had structural concerns, which allowed his father to be precise and interested in a way he wasn't about most things. Marcus watched the clock on the microwave. The storage room was off the back hallway, a space that had always existed in the house as a kind of repository for the things that didn't fit anywhere else. Not a large room, not a hoarder's room. Just the ordinary accumulation of a family that had been in one place for 3 decades. Boxes, old appliances, things kept because discarding them had never been a priority. His father stood at the door while Marcus carried things out, because his back made lifting difficult now. He'd said this on the phone when he'd called to ask for help. I can't manage the heavy ones myself. This was the most he'd ever asked for. Marcus had noted this at the time and filed it under things that are fine because he asked and I'm going. He moved boxes into the hallway. Some were labeled in his mother's handwriting. Kitchen extras, spare blankets, photos, and some in his father's careful print. Some weren't labeled at all. What do you want to keep? Marcus asked. I'll tell you as we go. They went slowly, because there was no other way to go. His father would look at a box, consider it, say keep or say no. Some things he held for a moment before deciding. A bread tin, a folded tablecloth in a pattern Marcus didn't recognize. A box of cassette tapes from a car they no longer owned. Dad. We don't have a cassette player. I know that. So, give me a minute. He held the box of tapes for that minute. Then he put it in the keep pile. Marcus said nothing. An hour in, he found a cardboard box at the back, behind a broken standing fan that had his name written on it in his mother's handwriting. His full name, Marcus James. He didn't know why the middle name. She'd done that sometimes, used his full name as if she was calling roll. He opened it. Inside, drawings. His, from when he was maybe 6, 7, 8 years old. The kind of drawings that couldn't be identified as anything in particular, but had clearly been executed with great seriousness. Houses, probably. Something that might be a dog. Several that were just color arranged in patterns, which Marcus dimly remembered was a phase he'd gone through, where he decided representation was unnecessary. Under the drawings, schoolwork. Report cards, a certificate for something, he squinted, for placing second in a school mathematics competition when he was 11. He'd forgotten entirely about this. He hadn't even known it had been kept. Under the report cards, a small stack of birthday cards. The ones he'd made himself before he started buying them. Cut paper, glued pieces, the kinds of things kids make when they still believe effort and affection are the same thing. He sat down on the floor next to the box. He hadn't planned to sit down. There wasn't room, really. The hallway was cluttered with sorted piles, but his legs had made the decision without consulting him. "What is it?" his father asked from the doorway. "Just my old stuff," Marcus said. His father came and looked into the box. He looked at it for a moment, and his expression didn't change much, but he said, "I didn't know your mother kept those." "Did you know they were in there?" "I assume." Marcus picked up the mathematics certificate. Second place. He would have been 11. His father would have been 49, 50. He tried to picture it, the school hallway, whoever handed out certificates, his parents in a row of plastic chairs. "Were you at this?" he asked, holding it up. His father looked at it. "Yes." "I don't remember you being there." "You didn't notice us," his father said. "You were watching the other kids after they announced the winner, the one who came first. You were doing the thing you used to do when you wanted to understand something. You were memorizing how he looked." Marcus set the certificate down. He hadn't thought about that in 30 years. But the description was accurate. That was exactly what he would have done. They went back to work. But something had shifted. The way something shifts in a room when a window is opened. The air is the same air, the light is the same light, but there is now a current in it that wasn't there before, and you notice things you weren't noticing. He noticed the hook by the back door where his father's coat hung, flanked by 2 empty hooks that had presumably held his mother's coat and his own when he was small enough to have a coat on a hook in this house. He noticed the kitchen calendar, the old kind with photographs of landscapes, still showing August even though it was November, which meant his father hadn't turned the page in 3 months. He almost said something. He didn't. He noticed the phone, not a smartphone. A landline still on the small table in the hallway. His father still had a landline. Marcus hadn't thought about this in years. Next to the phone was a small notebook, blue cover, the kind you could get from any stationery shop. It was sitting at an angle like it had been put down quickly. He almost didn't pick it up. He should tell you, Marcus was not someone who went through other people's things. He had always had a particular respect for privacy, which was genuine and also, if he was honest, convenient, because respecting privacy meant not finding things out. But the notebook was open. He hadn't opened it. He picked it up because it was open. The page was a list. Dates in a column on the left, in his father's careful print. Next to each date, a short notation. He looked at them for a moment before his eyes understood the pattern. February 4th. M called. March 19th. M called. April 2nd. M called. May 11th. M called. The entries went back. He turned the pages carefully. 3 years. Just dates. Just that notation. M called. And then sometimes a single additional detail. M called. Birthday. Or once. M called. Twice in 1 week. The gaps between entries were long. Not always. There were clusters sometimes, especially around Christmas and birthdays. But then stretches of 6, 7, 8 weeks with nothing. A 12-week gap the previous autumn. Another long one in spring, which would have been, Marcus calculated, when he'd been traveling for work. There were no notations for the days his father had received money transfers, no notations for the insurance payments Marcus handled, or the times he'd arranged a repair at the house by calling the contractor directly. Just this one column, the days Marcus had called first. He stood in the hallway holding the notebook. He stood there long enough that his father came to find him. Robert looked at the notebook. He didn't say anything immediately. He had the expression of a man who had been found out about something that wasn't quite shameful, but was private. Not embarrassed exactly, more like, "Ah, so that's what we're doing now." "I was going to put it away," he said. "How long have you been keeping this?" A pause. "A while." "Why?" His father looked at the page Marcus had it open to. He seemed to be deciding what to say, in the way he always decided things, methodically, without rushing. "I wasn't keeping score," he said finally. "I want you to understand that. I wasn't keeping it to show you." "Then why?" "Because." He stopped. He reached out and Marcus gave him the notebook, and he closed it and held it in both hands. "Because some days it felt like a long time since I'd heard from you, and I couldn't be sure if it was actually a long time or if I was just..." He turned the notebook over. "I'm old. Old people lose track of time. I didn't always trust what I felt, so I wrote it down." Marcus didn't say anything. "It wasn't for you," his father said again. "It was for me." They stood in the hallway with the boxes around them. "What would you have said?" "That's not rhetorical. Just think about it for a moment. You're in that hallway. You found the notebook. Your father is standing in front of you in a cardigan with 2 missing buttons. What do you say? Leave a comment if something comes up, genuinely. Sometimes it helps to name what you do from the outside looking in, before the situation is in front of you." Marcus said, "I sent money every month." His father looked at him. "I handled the insurance, the contractor last year for the water heater. I called him, I organized it." "I know," his father said. "I was making sure you were..." "I know," his father said again. No impatience in it. No accusation, just the quiet tone of a man who'd already been through the argument in his head and had come out the other side. "I know you did." "I never said you didn't." "Then..." Marcos. Just the name, the same way his mother used to say it. Not angry, just stop for a second. Come sit down. They sat at the kitchen table again, which was where everything important in this house had always happened. His father made more coffee without asking if Marcus wanted any, because that was what you did. Marcus thought about the 4 o'clock call. He thought about his wife's pause. He thought about the drive out here, checking the time at every traffic light. He thought about 12 weeks. His father put the coffee down and sat. He looked at his hands on the table for a moment. "You know what I think about a lot?" he said, not looking up yet. "When you were about 15, you had this habit. You'd come home from school and you'd go straight to your room, which was normal. All kids do that. I did that. But sometimes, maybe once a week, you'd come in and you'd stop in the kitchen first. You'd get a glass of water, and I'd be there, or your mother would be there, and you wouldn't say much, just, 'How was your day?' 'Fine. How was yours?' 5 minutes, maybe less." He looked up. "I always knew the days you did that, you'd had a harder day. You needed to just be near someone. You didn't want to talk about it. You just wanted someone in the room." Marcus remembered this. He hadn't thought of it in years, but he remembered it immediately, the way his father described it. I still have days like that, his father said. I'm 78. I still have days when I'd like someone in the room. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, the car passed on the street. I'm not asking you to move back, his father said, with a very brief version of the dry humor Marcus had always liked in him and had somehow forgotten he had. I'm not asking for anything I haven't asked for. He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. I got used to the short ones. Your voice in the phone. A few minutes. I got used to those, and then I'd count the time between them, and sometimes it was long. That's all. Marcus looked at the table. He thought about the things he'd told himself over the years. That his father was independent, self-sufficient, not the kind to need. That no news was good news. That the money meant he was taken care of, which meant he was fine, which meant Marcus could calibrate his attention toward the things that were more urgently demanding of it. And there had always been something more urgently demanding of it. There was always something. He thought about called twice in 1 week, written down because it was remarkable, because it was rare enough to be worth noting. He said, I didn't know. I know you didn't. I thought, as long as you had what you needed. I did have what I needed, his father said. Mostly. And Marcus understood what mostly meant. The pause before it, the mostly. He'd spent 12 years making sure his father had everything except the thing that didn't cost anything to give. He didn't say all of this out loud. He didn't have the words for it yet, not in the way that would come later, weeks later, lying awake at 1 a.m. next to his sleeping wife, when he'd have all the words, but no one to say them to. Right now he had the kitchen table and the humming refrigerator, and his father sitting across from him holding a coffee cup, not asking for an apology, not cataloging failures, just present. I should have called more, Marcus said. Probably, his father said, not to be cruel, just because it was true, and he was an engineer, and engineers did not benefit from softening load-bearing facts. I'm sorry. His father looked at him. The look was not what Marcus had expected. It wasn't absolution, wasn't the wave of the hand that would let him feel resolved. It was something quieter than that. Consideration, the look of a man who was weighing something with care. All right, he said. That was all. All right. Which was not small, Marcus would later understand. From a man who did not perform emotion, from a man who had spent 3 years writing down the dates his son had called in a blue notebook with no audience in mind, all right was a great deal. They went back to the storage room. They worked for another hour. Marcus moved things his father directed. The keep pile grew and the discard pile grew. At some point, Marcus found, in a box neither of them had labeled, a collection of his own old school books, the kind with pages that had gone soft at the corners. His father said, keep, without looking too long at them, and Marcus put them with the others. Near the end, Marcus found the telephone book, an actual telephone book, a small address book, the leather kind with a broken clasp. Inside were names and numbers in the family's accumulated handwriting, some his mother's, some his father's, a few that Marcus recognized as his own teenage handwriting from the years when he'd occasionally added someone's number. There were pages marked with small symbols that Marcus couldn't decode, a dot, a check mark, a faint asterisk. He almost just put it in the keep pile without looking. But he flipped through it to the M section, and there was his own name and his own number. His current number, the mobile, which meant it had been updated at some point, updated carefully, and next to it, in very small print, a series of dates that he'd seen a version of before, different from the notebook. Not dates he'd called, dates he'd promised to call and hadn't. Set Saturday, a date. No notation after it. Said he'd call this week. Another date. Blank. Not a long list. Maybe 8 or 9 entries over the space of 2 years. But there they were, in pencil, so light you might miss them. The paper record of a man who'd been waiting and had taken it so little for granted that he'd written down when he was supposed to expect it, so that he could believe a specific future thing instead of just hoping in general. Marcus closed the address book. He stood in the smaller, now emptier storage room, and he held the address book, and he thought about all the Saturdays of his life, the number of Saturdays in 2 years, and what it might feel like to hold a specific one in your mind as the Saturday. He thought, I have to stop finding things in this house. He thought, I can't stop finding things in this house. We should probably start deciding about the discard pile, he said. His voice came out slightly flat. What goes where? Tomorrow, his father said. I thought we'd finish today. It's 4:30, his father said, and I'm tired. And you've been looking at that address book for 5 minutes. Marcus looked up. His father was watching him from the hallway. Not unkindly. I made something earlier, his father said, if you're hungry. Dad, Marcus stopped. He'd been about to say, I have a call. He'd been about to say, I need to get back. What did you make? Soup, the lentil one. It was the soup his father had always made in autumn. Marcus hadn't thought about it in years. It was just soup. It was just a thing his father did in October and November, and the fact that it had existed every autumn of Marcus's childhood, and he hadn't thought about it once in 12 years was... He didn't have a word for what it was. He put the address book in the keep pile. I'll call Sarah, he said. She'll need to know I'm not driving back tonight. His father looked at him with a particular stillness of a man who has learned not to expect things too easily. You don't have to, he said. I know, Marcus said. He called Sarah from the hallway, near the old landline that still worked. She answered quickly. Is everything okay? She said. Fine, I'm going to stay tonight. I'll drive back in the morning. A pause. Okay, she said, and then, good. The way she said good, it was the same as the pause that morning, the same thing he hadn't asked about. He understood it now. He'd go home tomorrow and ask her about the pause. He put his phone in his pocket. His father was in the kitchen, moving quietly, getting out bowls. Marcus stood in the hallway for a moment. He looked at the empty coat hooks, the 2 that had always been empty since his mother's coat came down. He looked at the calendar showing August. He looked at the landline on the small table, the blue notebook his father had carried back in from the hallway and placed there again without comment. He walked into the kitchen. He asked, Do you need anything? His father turned slightly. There's bread in the cupboard. I'll get it. They had soup and bread at the kitchen table. The lentil soup was the same as it had always been, slightly more garlic than most people would use, which was a specific choice his father had always made and defended in the mild, immovable way he defended all his specific choices. Marcus didn't say anything. He ate 2 bowls. His father told him, over dinner, about the neighbor who'd moved in 2 years ago, a man named Eric who grew tomatoes and had opinions about it. about a book he'd been reading that was about the history of a river, which was the kind of book his father had always loved. History that moved through infrastructure, through the physical world. About a bird that had been coming to the garden recently. He described it carefully, the way he described things he'd looked up. Marcus listened, not performing listening, actually listening. It wasn't difficult. He'd just been somewhere else all these years, and now he was here, and his father was talking about a bird with the quiet animation of someone who'd been storing these observations up for a while. Not dramatically, just in the way you store things that have no immediate recipient. Sounds like a field fair, Marcus said. Dark tail, reddish breast? His father looked at him with mild surprise. Yes, actually. They come through in November sometimes. On the way south. I didn't know you knew birds. I don't really. I looked one up a few months ago. My neighbor has a similar one. He shrugged. Something stick. His father nodded. He had a small, private look on his face that Marcus couldn't quite read, but that felt, somehow, like something he'd wanted not to lose. After dinner, Marcus washed the bowls. His father dried them, because that was the order they'd always done it in this house. Marcus washing, his father drying, which was established when Marcus was about 8 and had apparently never required revision. The guest room has clean sheets, his father said. Thanks. There's an extra blanket in the wardrobe if you're cold. Okay. Marcus. He turned from the sink. His father was holding the dish towel and looking at him with the expression he sometimes had when he was going to say something he'd thought about, but not yet committed to saying. He'd had this expression before important things, before Marcus left for university, before he told him about his mother's diagnosis, before a handful of things that had come to matter. I'm glad you're staying, he said, not elaborated, not dressed up. I'm glad you're staying. Marcus said, Me too. He meant it, which he hadn't expected to, but standing in the kitchen with the dish towel and the bowls and the autumn dark outside, he meant it in a way that seemed to fill more space than the sentence. He slept in the guest room. He lay in the narrow bed. It was the same bed from when he'd had this room. He'd had this room before it became the guest room, which meant at some point his childhood bed had simply become the bed that visitors slept in. And he stared at the ceiling. The ceiling was the same ceiling. He lay there for a long time and thought about the notebook, about the list of dates, about the gaps between them. He thought about all the things he'd used as reasons, the work travel, the project launches, the general busyness that felt so non-negotiable from the inside and which, from the outside of this room, in this house, on this ceiling, looked more like a habit than a necessity. He thought about the soup his father still made in autumn, the tomato-growing neighbor, the field fair in the garden. He thought about his mother's coat hooks, still empty. He thought about a version of himself at 15, coming in through the kitchen door on a hard day, not saying anything, just getting a glass of water, just needing someone in the room. He thought about how his father had remembered that, how he'd kept it, the way he'd kept everything, precisely, without sentiment, but kept. He was not the kind of person who cried easily. He didn't cry then, but he lay very still on the ceiling and felt something that had been pushing against him all day finally stop being containable, and he let it be there, and it was not comfortable and not clean, but it was real, and after a while it settled into something quieter. In the morning he woke to the sound of his father already in the kitchen. He dressed and went down. His father had made coffee and was standing at the window with his cup, looking at the garden. The morning light was the grey, level light of November that makes everything look like it's been placed there carefully. "Sleep all right?" his father asked. "Eventually." His father made a sound that was almost a laugh. He pointed at the garden. "There he is." Marcus looked. At the edge of the lawn, near the hedge, the bird. Reddish breast, dark tail, exactly as described. Poking at the grass with the business-like focus of something that had a lot of ground to cover and knew it. "Fieldfare," Marcus confirmed. "Passing through," his father said. "On the way south." His father nodded. He watched the bird. Marcus watched the bird. The coffee was good. His father had always made good coffee, another thing Marcus had forgotten he knew. They didn't talk for a few minutes. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the other kind, the kind that doesn't need to be filled because the presence is the point. Marcus recognized it from the kitchen at 15, the glass of water. He hadn't expected to find it again here at 39, but there it was. "I'll come back more," he said. "I want to, not just when something needs doing." His father didn't say, "Finally." Didn't say, "You should have done that years ago." He was not, had never been, that kind of man. He said, "I'd like that. I'll call more. First, I mean, not just when you call." His father looked at him briefly. He nodded once. He turned back to the window. The fieldfare had moved to the other side of the lawn and was doing the same methodical thing over there. Marcus watched it. "Does it come every day?" he asked. "For the past 3 weeks, his father said. "Always around this time." "That's reliable." "Yes," his father said. "I appreciate that about it." Marcus drove home at 10. His father stood at the door in the brown cardigan with the missing buttons and said, "Drive safe," which was what he always said. Marcus said he would. He got in the car, backed out carefully to avoid the crack in the driveway, and started down the road. He got to the end of the street and stopped at the sign. He thought about turning back to say something else. He didn't know what. He thought about it for a moment. He kept driving, but he reached for his phone, staying stopped at the sign, not moving yet, and he called his father. 3 rings. 4. "Marcus?" He didn't know what he was going to say. He'd called before he had a reason. "Just making sure you heard the door close all right." "I didn't check the latch." A pause, then the very quiet version of his father's almost laugh. "It closed fine," his father said. "Okay, good. Drive safe." "I will." He put the phone down and pulled away from the sign. He drove 2 hours and 40 minutes home. He didn't check the time. He thought about the lentil soup and the fieldfare and a mathematics certificate from when he was 11. He thought about a blue notebook with dates in a column. He thought about what it must be like to hold a specific Saturday in your mind as the Saturday. He thought, I can't get the years back. He knew this. He wasn't going to pretend he could. But there was next Saturday, and the one after that. He pulled into his driveway, and Sarah came to the door before he'd even gotten out of the car. She looked at his face. What happened? She said. Nothing bad, he said. I'll tell you. He went inside. That night after dinner, he called his father again. Just a talk, no reason, no agenda. His father answered on the second ring, which was faster than usual, though Marcus told himself not to read into that. They talked about the river book, about a bridge in the news, about what Marcus was working on and whether it was interesting, which his father asked with genuine curiosity, the way he always had, always treating Marcus's work as something worth understanding. 20 minutes, maybe 25. When he hung up, he sat for a moment with the phone in his hand. He didn't write anything down. He didn't keep a notebook. But he thought, this is the thing, not the money transfers or the arranged contractors, or the right responses when things needed solving. This. The voice in the phone, the unhurried question, the 20 minutes that cost nothing and meant something he couldn't have calculated if he'd tried. He thought, I'll call Thursday. And he meant it the way his father had always meant the things he said, methodically, as a plan, as a commitment to a specific future thing. He put the phone down. He went to find his wife. That's where the story ends. Not with everything repaired. You can't repair years with a conversation and a bowl of soup and a night in your childhood bed. But with something small and specific and available, a phone call made first on a Thursday for no particular reason, which is sometimes the whole thing. If this story made you think of someone, a father, a mother, a person who picks up on the second ring, maybe don't wait for a storage room to give you a reason. The call takes 5 minutes. The 5 minutes, it turns out, is what gets written down. Leave something in the comments if this landed somewhere for you. We'll see you in the next one.